Hello and welcome to Macros with Mythili, the ET Now show that takes a hard look at all the major macroeconomic stories and developments in India and overseas. This week we're going to take a hard look at what is undeniably the story of the year, Donald Trump's victory in the US presidential elections. And joining me in that are Mohandas Pai, Chairman, Manipal Global Education, Vikram Mehta, Chairman, Brookings India, and Rajat Nag, former MD of the Asian Development Bank. And instead of the usual panel discussion, since they are all experts in their respective fields, let's hear them out one by one. So let me start with Mr. Mohandas Pai. Mr. Pai, what does the Trump victory mean for the US and the world economy? Trump has gone on and on about making America great again, but without spelling out any specific plans for that. At the same time, you also heard people like Simon Johnson, former IMF chief economist, say that a Trump victory would cause markets to crash and result in leading the world into another recession. The prediction about the stock market crash has not come true, but can we really draw any comfort from that? What is your view?
See, my view is that the reality of Trump is there right now, just like the reality of Brexit drawn on everybody. There could be a shake-up of the markets, but it will be temporary. The market has digested it. The market will digest it. The market will move on. There's uncertainty now till he is officially elected president in January. In these 2-3 months, you'll probably get to hear what he's going to do, how he's going to say it. And I'm sure he'll be a very reasonable pro-establishment president as against the anti-establishment stance he had. Because once you come in and sit on the chair of the president of the United States, you have the response to the whole world. If the market crashes today, then Trump will be deep in trouble. Everybody will turn against him, right? Your 401k plan and everything is invested in the market. So he has to take care of the markets. And he's a market person. He's a businessman. So I don't think we have much to worry. But we have to keep our ears and eyes open because we don't know what he's going to do. And my personal view is he'll be a very reasonable president, pro-business president. He will not do any of the socialistic ideas that he planned to do. And I think he will possibly distance the US from the rest of the world in terms of military power. He will try to make the Europeans pay for their security. He'll make the Japanese pay for the security. And I think he'll focus more internally on the United States and jobs and his constituency than the world.
But in his first speech after he'd won, he struck a fairly conciliatory note, saying that America would try to get along with all nations, though he did add that it would be all nations willing to get along with us. Even so, can he really afford to be indifferent to the world economy?
Well, I think Obama did something wonderful. He did not allow US troops to go to Syria, right? He said he'll use technology. He made the Syrians fight. I think that's the right thing to do. So now the idea of the US troops going somewhere is not there. What happens to NATO in the face of a resurgent Putin? That's something that you have to see. I think Putin will, I think Trump will make them pay for it. And what happens to Japan in the face of a resurgent China? He'll probably read the right act to China in terms of China's access to US markets, because that is very, very clear. But he may also ask the Japanese to pay and just try to keep them quiet while he focuses on the United States. See, the message of the election to me is this, that is a large section of American population which is disgruntled, which is frustrated, which is very angry. Their living standards have not gone up for 10 to 15 years. Number of jobs have come down. Technology advancement has destroyed jobs. Automation destroyed jobs, and don't see me much hopes of getting the kind of jobs. And to add insult to injury, last year, the number of non-white babies was more than white babies. The fundamental shift has happened in the United States already, and this is the result of all this in trying to get an anti-establishment outsider to come. So the anger has to be addressed, and that's why he said he'll focus more on the US, his constituency, than outside, because I'm sure he'll want 2 terms.
You spoke about the likelihood of his reading out the riot act to China. But can the world really afford to have 2 major powers at war with each other, even if it is trade wars? In fact, one of the big fears is what does his victory mean for trade, given that he's made no secret whatsoever about his protectionist tendencies? How is that likely to impact the sector that you are most closely associated with, IT and outsourcing? What does it really mean for those sectors?
Well, I think the Trans-Pacific Trade Treaty is half dead. I don't think it's come through because everybody has spoken about it, including Hillary. So that idea of creating an open market with China, I think is going to see problems. The Chinese have been devaluing the currency in the last 6-8 months. I think he'll take it up much more strongly because the US deficit, which has gone up, both trade and in terms of the budget deficit, has got to do a lot with what China is selling. So I think that's a big issue. And what China is doing in South China Sea is something that's affecting American interest in the Pacific. And Obama did something in having American forces in Darwin or Perth. So I think this is something that he has to do. So I think they'll be tougher with China. As far as outsourcing is concerned, I really don't think there'll be much to do because the job is getting automated, jobs are moving faster, and there's a shortage of great talent in the valley. You could see that unemployment in IT is 3 to 4%, and that means there's a very serious issue. And in the United States today, Silicon Valley is a growth engine. Silicon Valley is producing high quality jobs, and Silicon Valley is getting money in. If you look at the market capitalization, top 10 companies, the largest number of companies are technology companies in the valley. So with all that, you can't afford to do anything to hurt them. So I think the outsourcing story is a little bit, we have to be skeptical of what it's going to do, the 30% tax and all that. I think it will settle itself out, because if it does something, there'll be an outflow of more work. Because despite automation, there's still requirement for a skill. So there will be some uncertainty till it happens, and any change in policy will require Congress to pass laws and things to come on. So it will be 6 to 8 months before, if anything has to happen, happens. Nothing is going to happen immediately, and there's enough time for people to look at their own strategies, see what they want to do, acquire some American companies which are down now because the valuations are down, and possibly build a larger local presence and get away any of the likely things that he could do.
On the issue of H-1B visas, another area that the IT sector is most concerned about, he has played hot and cold, saying that he intends to raise the wages for H-1B employees, forcing companies to give those coveted entry-level jobs to existing domestic pool of Native Americans and immigrant workers in the US instead of flying in cheaper workers from overseas. What does that mean for that sector? He also supports limiting green cards for foreign workers. What do you think are the views of the real Donald Trump? And is there really a real Donald Trump? And does he have any firm views at all, Mr. Pai?
Well, he'll try to bring about some changes. He will make the process much tougher to say that you must give notice. You and now you must give notice, you must do many things. He could make it tougher, he could raise the fees. But I don't think anything radical will come. He'll do something to show that he's trying to do something. The fact is that America requires people on H-1B. It cannot do without people on H-1B. And H-1B is not such a major issue in an industry where employment is 3 to 4. It's highly visible, that's all, but it's not a major issue. The problem with America is the mobility of labor is very less. People in Arizona don't want to go to California. People in, let's say, Oregon don't want to go to Boston. And there's work in Boston, there's work somewhere else. They don't want to travel, or they don't have the skills. And there's a variety of technology skills that are required, right from cutting edge AI and ML, right to C++. There's a variety of work. And there is no skill in the cutting edge at all except in the valley. So I think it's talking from the outside without getting into details is very different. Now that he's in power, he'll see all this. I don't think any radical changes are going to come in the H-1B. The H-1B is very, very small to impact America.
Will we see progress on the totalization talks? Indian professionals contribute about $1 billion annually to the US Social Security system, but they cannot claim the refund when they go back to India, since according to US laws, foreigners can claim Social Security refund only after 10 years of service, but the H-1B visas are only for 6 years.
Well, I think there was progress because Obama promised to do. I remember I picked it up 10 years ago and started talking to government totalization. Then the government worked to the NRI minister to bring about totalization in some 12, 13 countries now through NASSCOM. We did a lot of work. And I think Prime Minister Modi has been talking to President Obama. And the contention Americans have been, you don't have a universal social security system in India. Now our social security system in India is becoming bigger. With the Jan Dhan and all kind of stuff, life insurance and all that, except that you don't get unemployment insurance. Now with DBT and others coming, we have some kind which is very, very broad-based. And I think that I think in the next 3 to 4 years we'll see progress, because Trump would want American military equipment to be sold to India. The Modi is on a buying spree. He's going to spend possibly 3 to 4 lakh crores on buying equipment, and he will buy government to government, G to G from the United States because they got great tech. And maybe Modi will make a deal with Trump, like a businessman, that you give me totalization, I'll give you $20 billion of orders for defense, or I'll give you an order for set up nuclear plants of 10,000 megawatts for, let's say, 15, 16, $20 billion. So I think there are a lot of scope, because Trump being a businessman, I think it'll be much more positive now.
As part of the G20 and the OECD, the US has been as part of the global moves in curbing BEPS, that is base erosion and profit shifting that the MNCs indulge in. But now that we have as president a man who's very proud of not having paid his taxes and refuses to make his returns public, what does that mean for US support for such global initiatives?
Well, I think the US will be disinterested because he wants to cut taxes. And I see by the end of the Trump presidency, we'll see greater divergence between in the income of people in the middle and the bottom and the top. The rich are going to get richer under Trump. There's no doubt about it. And Trump is all for people rich getting richer. He wants to cut the tax at the top level. He wants to make sure he cuts social security and the social sector spending. He wants to do it with Obamacare and all that. And he doesn't care about the people who are poor. So there'll be greater divergence. And I think BEPS may be a casualty. The Europeans will insist because Europe is strongly controlled by the socialists and they will insist. And I think there could be a slight disconnect there. But I think the rest of the world will follow BEPS, and maybe on BEPS, I think we'll probably see Trump having some pushback because it's all pro-industry, it's for pro-large corporation, lesser tax for corporations.
Over the years, the US has become a much more unequal society. And will we see inequalities rise now that you have as president a man who clearly does not believe in taxes? How will this affect Indo-US economic relations?
No, I don't think our interest will be too advertised, because remember, we have an alpha male as PM too. Modi is no ordinary man, right? Trump is no ordinary man. They'll get along fine, right? They will speak the right act to each other. They understand power. Remember, Trump came from nowhere, even though he's rich. Modi came as a loner and he did everything on his own. He understands power, right? Modi understands power, the exercise of power. Trump understands power, the exercise of power. They are talking as equals. I think it'll be great to see them work together.
Let me now turn to Vikram Mehta for his views on the Trump victory and its implications for the oil sector, renewables, climate change, etc., all areas that you have a very close interest in, Vikram. So let me start by asking you the same question that I asked Mr. Pai. What does the Trump victory mean for the US and the world economy? Many had predicted a stock market crash and economic mayhem, but at least, the prediction of a stock market crash has not come true as yet. But can we draw any comfort from that? What is your view?
We don't really know what his economic policy is, other than the fact that it is anti-globalization. It is focused on issues that are related to creating jobs in America, building up the infrastructure. It's a mix of so many statements, none of which sort of hang together. It is against free trade. So all of these do add a huge measure of uncertainty to the world economy. I think what we have seen today, or rather yesterday, is a result that in some senses reflects the revenge of the underclass, the working class. And Trump has tapped that resentment against the elite, and he has ridden those waves of resentment towards victory. Now, he is a man with no conviction. He's a man that has not held on to an ideology. I don't think his track record suggests that he is someone who has held fast to any particular belief. He's a man for himself. So against that backdrop, anything that we read now or we hear about him is going to be new. I am very, very nervous about the future of the world economy.
Trump wants fewer restrictions on big business and is regarded as very friendly to the interests of the oil, coal and natural gas industry, which he claims will add as many as 500,000 jobs. So what impact do you think his victory will have on the oil sector, a sector with which you are very closely involved and are very familiar with?
See, the oil sector is currently facing pressures from several directions. There is the concern about climate change, global warming. There's the regulatory pressures that governments are imposing on oil companies, again driven by concerns regards global warming. And then there are the issues of economics because of the fall in oil prices. Now, Obama, in some senses, was taking steps to reflect this mood against large companies. He cancelled the pipeline from Canada to America, the Keystone pipeline. That would have brought 800,000 barrels of oil a day into America. And he cancelled it because of environmental reasons. And he made the point that a time is going to come when reserves that have been discovered will not be monetized. There's also public pressure against oil companies. There's the New York bar has filed, or there's a case against ExxonMobil in the New York bar, accusing or alleging that ExxonMobil is responsible for climate change and global warming. And there have been many such suits in the past. The point is that Trump has always been a skeptic about climate change and environmental issues in general. So I suspect that he will be more relaxed, and oil companies might get somewhat of some space to begin to work in areas that have been closed to them so far. My greatest worry is that the Paris deal might come unstuck, that there will be no real effort to finance the technologies required to curb global warming, and that Trump will basically sort of give a thumbs up to all those who consider climate change and global warming as a hoax perpetrated on the international community by the scientists. So it's a big worry. I mean, I think Trump is, again, as I say, he doesn't really, one doesn't know where he stands on any of this, other than I'm reflecting some of the statements that he's made in the past.
And will we see the same kind of distancing from the US on the trade front, wherein the US turns more and more inward?
Yes, again, you know, this is one area where he's been more vocal and more emphatic than anything else, and that is that he is against an open trading system. He's opposed the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, to that extent, of course, it offers India some degree of opportunity, because India was not part of TPP. But the economic consensus that we have all been we've all assumed is going to drive the economies in the 21st century of open trade, free trade, global integration, that consensus is being questioned, if not broken, by Trump. He's basically throwing all those assumed verities into the waste paper basket and saying, no, I am actually going to raise boundaries against free trade. I'm going to disallow people from coming into the country on the basis of comparative advantage, or people and goods and services. So it's again back, a massive uncertainty.
Greater inequality, a more polarized world, is that the best we can expect under the new presidency?
A world that is divided, that's polarized, an underclass that is angry at the establishment. There's a generalized anxiety about the future. People have diminished optimism about the future. And against that backdrop, a man like Trump, who offers, he doesn't offer hope, but he essentially challenges the establishment, becomes the repository of some expectation. Now, it's an abstract sort of, he's offered nothing to anyone in specific terms. His victory, in my view, is a victory for those who want to rebel against the establishment, who want to rebel against the elite. It's the sort of sense of generalized anxiety that led to the French Revolution, and it's no one really can understand. In the poor, the young, the blue collar sort of workers who've lost their jobs and who don't have the training to find another job, all of them have lost confidence in the existing political system. And Trump comes in and essentially offers them an alternative without in any way actually offering them anything at all. But they've voted against the existing political system. So any question that you may ask about Trump right now has to be answered in very general, vague terms, because we don't know.
Let me just stop there because it's time for us to slip into a very short break. But please do stay with us. We'll be back very soon. Welcome back. You're watching Macros with Mythili, and we're discussing the possible implications of a Trump presidency and what does it mean with three experts in their field: Rajat Nag on trade, Vikram on the oil sector, and Mohandas Pai on IT, outsourcing, and a whole host of other things. Let me now move to our last expert, Rajat Nag, to understand the implications of the Trump victory for global trade. On the trade front, India's strength has always been in the services, in the export of services. Given Trump's well-known position on H-1B visas and outsourcing, will export of Indian services be hit very badly?
India's total trade with US is roughly about $100 billion. And there has been talk of getting it up to $500 billion in the next few years. A large part of it will be, as you rightly said, on services. My feeling is that US imports services from India, not because of any sense of charity or altruism, but because it's in America's interest. And US companies benefit significantly. For example, 84% of H-1B visas in computer technology was given to India. 50% of the H-1B visas in engineering was given to India. And those were given because America was getting world-class quality at much less price. And I think the American companies will recognize this and do recognize this and will keep putting pressure. So yes, there will be pressure on services and India will be vulnerable on that score. But my own feeling is that US's own self-interest in services will prevent or at least dampen the more radical approaches to clamping down on services, as some might have said during the campaign or some might fear now.
You've been with the ADB for many years, and you've also seen how over the years we've not really had any meaningful reform of multilateral institutions like the IMF and World Bank. These have remained the preserve of the West, essentially the US and Europe. Will that reform take a further backseat now?
Well, this is certainly an area of concern as well. I mean, there are many areas of concern with the, at least during the political campaign, what was said. I have a feeling that President-elect is going to be much less multilateralism oriented than his predecessors. He has spoken of dealing bilaterally with various countries, including with India or China or Russia. So I think multilateralism will suffer under the new administration. G20, the international institutions will probably face some fairly rough weather and resistance from the new administration, which again I think will be unfortunate for the world economy, including, I must say, the US. But I am afraid that the President-elect has talked a lot about issues which seem to indicate his reluctance towards multilateralism, be it trade deals that we talked about, be it the international institutions, be it G20 or whatever.
There's also been a lot of talk in the past of an alternate international reserve currency to the dollar. Do you see an alternative like the Chinese yuan emerge during the Trump presidency, or will the US dollar continue to be numero uno?
It will depend on how the next few weeks and months unfold. But I think the dollar will remain a very important, if not the sole, international reserve currency. Obviously, renminbi is going to be increasingly important. Euro has lost some of its luster, but still remains a very important currency. So in a multipolar world, the US dollar will not be the only currency, but I think it will remain a very important currency. And I think the US dollar will again remain the currency for safe haven. I think again it's important not to overreact to what has happened in the US election day before yesterday. Obviously there has been and will be some buffeting. Obviously there will be some pressures, but the world sort of in a market seem to have sort of weathered it reasonably okay after the initial shock, and that will remain. The greatest concern will be what happens on the trade. If there is indeed a trade war, which will be to nobody's advantage, then I think you will see that the dollar will come under great pressure. I think the Fed will hold off increasing interest rates at the end of this year as was originally thought, because I think they would want to see some sort of cushion. And you would probably see the dollar restoring or staying as a currency of importance, currency of international reserve.
My last question to you, Rajat, is should we worry about the fact that now that we have a president of the most powerful country in the world, a man who's never held a public position and also lacks a worldview in a globalized world, what does that really mean for the global economy?
Mythili, that's a very important question. I think the very fact that the US is the world's largest exporter, economically the second largest economy, but much more importantly, a very major security provider, security umbrella to so much of the world, including, of course, Asia. So yes, what happens in the US is obviously of concern to the rest of the world. Now, should the world worry? I think again, we know what the president-elect has said in his political campaign. And if those were to be in fact his policies, then the world should indeed worry a lot. But I would want to see how his political rhetoric during the campaign get translated into administration policy. And there are many examples when during the political campaigns, candidates do say things which reality of office tempers them to something more reasonable. For example, there are so many inconsistencies in what the president-elect has said. I mean, on the one hand, he has talked about major tax cuts. He hasn't said about how the tax cuts will be financed. But on the other hand, he has also talked about the $20 trillion federal debt being totally unsustainable and unacceptable. So how do you match these two? And there are many other examples. My feeling is that right now is not the time to sort of gaze too much into the past political campaign rhetoric and project into the future. Let's see how the administration is formed. Let's see the people that are given the important cabinet positions. Let's see what happens in terms of the administration coming together in terms of his policies, and we'll see. But definitely there is reason for great concern based on what the candidate president-elect has said, and time will tell whether those in fact will unfold or not. At the moment, we should just wait and see.
Well, I'm afraid we're completely out of time, so I'll have to end this discussion now. Thank you so much, Mr. Pai, Vikram, as also Rajat, for joining me and giving us your perspective of what to expect under the President Trump. Thank you also for watching. Remember, we'll be back next week with yet another edition of Macros with Mythili. Till then, it's thank you and goodbye from all of us at ET Now.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.